100 years ago, if we were to use those methods today, it would not be effective. It would be backwards. We would lose a lot of time, we'd lose a lot of energy. So, modern means of transportation, that's the only way to go. That is progressive. However, all of this is based, as I said, on the belief that Islam is a human product. So what has happened today is that we have modern trends. Three major trends. The first is that Islam is irrelevant amongst Muslims. Those who have accepted that Islam, in fact, is irrelevant. Just as among Christians, among Jews and others, there arose among them those who rejected religion in its entirety. Human rights are not preserved. Oppression of women is widespread. Therefore, Islam is irrelevant today. Among Muslim leaders, we had Ataturk. Ataturk, who began after World War I, began the secularist movement on a wide-scale level in Turkey. Ataturk tried his best to eradicate Islam as we know it. He instructed that the adhan should be made in Turkish, that in the mosques, chairs like what is found in the churches should be introduced. The prayers should be done in Turkish. It was illegal for any man to wear a turban on his head. He had to wear a bowler cap, like what was worn in Europe at that time. So he tried his utmost. However, the will of the people overcame his efforts. He didn't succeed. The second major trend is the belief that parts of Islam are relevant, but parts are not. Culture, cultural ties, family, festivals, the Eids, etc. These are okay things. They bind people together. It's a societal interaction. They're good. But there are other parts of Islam which have to do with governance, legal systems, etc., which are not relevant. The third trend is the trend that all of Islam is relevant. All of Islam is relevant. That trend is labeled as fundamentalist. Those who say that all of Islam is relevant, then they are considered to be the fundamentalists. And fundamentalism is equivalent to terrorism. Fundamentalists are terrorists. Either they openly espouse terrorism or they quietly hold it in their hearts. In fact, after 9/11 in the US, the New York Times had a list of points by which one could identify a fundamentalist, a terrorist, a secret terrorist. Obviously, if he's blowing up the World Trade Center, you know he's definitely a terrorist. But if he's just walking around amongst you, he's a Muslim, how to distinguish between him and the moderate Muslims, right? They listed, number one on the list is he prays 5 times a day. This is one of the signs to know a fundamentalist. He prays 5 times a day. Number two, he fasts in the month of Ramadan, the whole month. Number three, he doesn't shake the hands of women. He won't shake. If a woman puts her hand out, he won't shake it. And the list went on to describe, in fact, a practicing Muslim. A practicing Muslim. He became the fundamentalist. The non-practicing Muslim, what we call the Friday Muslim, he only shows up in the masjid on Fridays, or the Ramadan Muslim, we'll see a lot of them when Ramadan comes along. These are the moderates. Right? But those who seek to practice Islam on a daily basis, regularly, they are the fundamentalists. So, this view, a view which is shared not only by the Western analysts, but also by Muslims who, not knowing Islam properly, were defeated by Western thought, the globalized Western philosophy. So, what we find today, we have heard, we have seen a variety of attempts to reinterpret Islam. To reinterpret Islam. So we hear, for example, on some occasions, those who say that we need a feminine tafsir of the Quran. A feminine tafsir of the Quran. Why? Because all of the great scholars of tafsir, the mufassirun, they were all men. So when they interpreted the Quran, they interpreted it according to male preferences. So we need some females to interpret the Quran for us. Also, we had the call for female imams. Why shouldn't there be female imams? Why should it always be male imams? This follows the general trend which took place in Christianity, where priests who weren't allowed to marry at first were then allowed to marry when the Protestant movement arose in the 15th century. Priests could then marry. This was a change. Modernism. Then, in the 20th century, we had female priests. With the rise of feminism, we had female priests. So now we have female priests. And eventually, we even have homosexual priests. This is the latest trend. We now have homosexual priests who perform homosexual marriages. Men can marry men, women can marry women, and be good Christians, no problem. These are obvious corruptions. Sometimes the modernist movement is for the better. In the case of Hinduism, for example, where the religion required that a woman whose husband dies and he is burnt, his body is burnt, to release his soul, they said that